In order to
Hi
follow
guys, it's
Buddhism,
Lita.
I must
So
not
this
cling to
is kind of
happiness
a
or
video
people that
that a
give me
lot of people have
happiness.
requested before.
Does this
How
mean
to
that I
be
shouldn't
happy.
make
I
friends
just wanted to
and
give you
or
guys a few
stop
tips of what I do
associating
to
with my
try and stay
friends,
happy as much as
as I
possible.
enjoy being
The
around
first
my
one that I
friends
found
and it
most
gives me
effective
happiness?
is actually one of the
Okay,
reasons
the
why I
word
make
happiness,
videos
again, the
is
ambiguity.
try making other people happy,
Buddhism says
because
that
when
none
you
of that
put other
brings you
people in a great
happiness.
mood, it is
And that's the
it's such a good
unfortunate
feeling.
thing, that
One
if these
time
things
when I went
gave
to
you happiness,
Starbucks, I saved
true
like
happiness, then you should
$3
cling to them and
just so I
hold
could
on
give
to
it to a
them.
homeless person outside
But
of
because
Starbucks
they
who
don't
asked
give
me
you
before I went in
happiness,
there
clinging to them is
for
a cause of
change.
suffering.
And you know, it's like
That's what
that's
Buddhism
such a
says.
good feeling,
Buddhism
is to give
doesn't say
someone
must not,
something
should
and make their
not.
day, even if you know them or not. It's just
Buddhism
try it,
says,
because it
if
really
then.
does actually make
So
a huge difference and makes you
it's
happy
much more
for a long
powerful.
time. Actually,
It's not
another
trying
tip
to
that I found really
convince you
useful,
or
especially
coerce
over
you
this
into
past
being
couple of
one way or
years,
another.
is
It's telling you
attempting to
the
erase
truth.
drama from your life.
And
I know that's
it's up to
kind
you
of
to
a
realize the
hard
truth,
thing to
appreciate
do
it, or deny
sometimes,
the truth.
but
So,
basically I know a lot of drama
if you
starts
cling to people,
from friends telling you something about someone else, or someone
the
saying
fact
something
that
about you.
or the idea that it
Basically,
makes you happy
if you just don't take part
is
in
an
it,
illusion.
it won't
And
affect you. So like, you know,
as you
if one of my
practice
friends
meditation,
were
you
to
realize
say,
that
oh
it's
yeah,
not
I hate
actually
this
making you
person,
happy. It's
oh
actually
they
just
did this and
giving you
said
some
this
pleasure,
about you and said
which
this about blah blah blah,
entices you to cling
then,
stronger,
you know, there's a
which
mature way to go
eventually leads
about
you
it, meaning
to
you can be a listener but not a
repeated
speaker. If you don't
distress
say
and suffering
anything,
when
no one
every
can
time you
hold
don't
anything
get what you
against
want,
you.
or every time you're forced
Or
to
what you can do, if
strive
you've heard
for,
someone say something about you,
the pleasant
just
states
ask
again.
them, hey, did you say this about me? I just want to know.
So the
And
enjoying
don't
being
get
around
mad at
your
them or
friends,
anything.
except
Don't
where it's
make a
involved with
fire that doesn't need
wholesomeness.
to be
There's
lit.
the case where
You
you're
know,
helping each other, where
it's not that hard to
you're
do. Just
appreciating each
let
other,
it roll off your back. Just try. The
where
next
you're
thing is,
compassionate,
remember
and
that
so
this
on,
too shall pass.
where you're able to support each other.
My dad said that to me a long time ago, and it's
positive.
really
But
affected
the
me a lot.
enjoyment,
You know, 'cause
the liking,
when you
or the
think about
attachment
it,
to pleasurable states
okay,
is
when I think back
unwholesome
to high
and
school,
will lead you
there
to
was a
suffer
lot of
when
drama
you
in
have to
high
leave your
school, you
friends,
know,
when you're
like
surrounded
girls
by unpleasant
fighting
people,
and me being a
et
part of the
cetera,
girls
etc. It means you're
fighting,
vulnerable.
stuff like that.
You're always
And when I think
vulnerable
back
to
to it now,
change,
it's
and
like,
therefore
that was
suffering
such a
is in your
small,
future.
just thing that
because of
doesn't
that
affect me
attachment.
anymore, and that's it. It's gone. And when I even think back to a couple months ago, some things that I was really upset about don't matter. It's just let it roll off your back, kind of like a duck when it goes underwater and it comes back out and it has all those little drippies that go off, yeah, like that. It might be kind of hard to practice that, but once you really get a hang of it, it really is easy. And another thing is, I actually heard this in a movie about a week ago. I can't even remember what movie it was, but it said, when you're with your friends, don't cry to them, just have fun with your friends. You know, it really makes a difference too, because it kind of makes you forget what you were upset about. Instead of adding on to it by telling people and crying to people about it, just have fun. And it'll just kind of... Another small tip that I'm not even sure if it's true, but it's kind of like a placebo effect, I guess, is I've heard that if you smile more, it actually releases a chemical in your body. I think it's insulin. I'm not sure. But it actually makes you happier if you smile more. And you know, I don't know if it's kind of like I said, a placebo sugar pill effect, where if you believe it, then it happens. But I mean, it's worked for me, so just try that. It's really easy. It's just... One thing that I've actually been struggling a lot with this year is don't let others push you to the point where you don't know yourself anymore. Now, this can be anybody, you know, attacking you, or saying that you're something you're not, or saying that you're not pretty enough, something like that. Or it can also be someone that you're jealous of, somebody that you wish you could be, something like that. Just don't let it push you. You're yourself, and that's it. I mean, it's as easy as that. I know it's kind of hard to find yourself, and I don't even know if this is me, I don't know, but it is kind of tough, but don't let it push you to the point where you're like, who am I even? Just...
How many of you have heard me give a talk or seen slides or read an article of mine about optimizing for happiness? Okay, a lot of you have. Some of you have not. Okay. So optimizing for happiness is something that I've been talking about for a while. And so I'll go over the basic concepts so that you understand it. This talk here is sort of a sequel to optimizing for happiness. This is part, let's see, let's be like Star Wars and make this part 4. Nobody knows how this stuff came to be yet. So what is optimizing for happiness? I have a hypothesis. And that is that companies can be about more than just making money. We live in a capitalist society, and most people would say, well, why do I have a company? I have a company in order to make money. Companies need to make money in order to survive. And if I make a bunch of money, then I will have what? Happiness? Okay, maybe, happiness. So my hypothesis is that, well, why go through that whole thing of making all this money to try and give you happiness? Why not cut that out and just optimize for what you really want instead, which is happiness, right? Because if you have a bunch of money, you may or may not be happy. But if you have happiness, well, then you'll be happy, right? All right, so here's the hypothesis. It goes like this. If you optimize for the happiness of your team members, right, the people that work at the company, then those people will enjoy what they're doing. They'll do their best work because they like being there. They like working on those products. And they'll create the best products and craft the best experiences, the services teams, for customers so that the customers and users will happily pay for those products and services, right? Because they like them, because they're good. And if the customers and users enjoy the products, some of those will be businesses, probably or individuals with some extra money, and they will pay you, which makes your shareholders happy, right? You increase the value of the company over time. Eventually, shareholders can make a return on their investment. That is a purely financial thing, but those people are involved in companies, and they're definitely involved in GitHub. Not only are external investors like Andreessen Horowitz, but every full-time person at GitHub is a shareholder or potential shareholder through having options. So this is the hypothesis. If you focus on the happiness of the team, it will make good products that people will pay for, make shareholders happy, and you can take those profits and funnel them back into enhancing the happiness of the team members. And you create this really great virtuous cycle that hopefully can continue, that generates happiness, and as an offshoot, as a natural byproduct, is making money, which is what's required to sustain a company in a capitalist environment. And so what is happiness, though? For many years, I never really sat down and defined it. I would just say, optimize for happiness, and then you're good to go, right? But okay, Tom, that's fine and all, but what is happiness? A lot of people, I think, look at companies, especially startups, especially San Francisco or Bay Area startups, and they say, oh, well, happiness is a ping pong table, or happiness is beer in the fridge, right? Or happiness is partying all the time at the office. There's a bunch of them. And I've said these things myself. Happiness is, a free laptop when you join the company. But are these things happiness? Like, is that happiness in and of itself? There's a few things that we've talked about that many of you have probably heard us talk about at GitHub about what makes us happy, or like demonstrations, or things that you see us doing or talking about. Things like, well, we don't have any managers. Or we work on whatever we want. Everyone at GitHub just works on whatever they want, and everything's fine. Or people work from wherever they want and whenever they want, right? Whatever time works best for them. Or we don't track vacation days. We allow people to come and speak at conferences. We'll pay for them to do that. We provide iPhones, iPads, and laptops for all new team members. We have copious beer in the fridge and behind the bar. We have a pool table, lots of office parties. We cater lunches sometimes. All of these things. You've probably heard lots of these things. You've seen lots of companies have these things. And you look at them and you say, well, okay, that company has all these things, but is that happiness, right? Is that happiness, or is that a superficial way to trap employees to stay at a company because it's superficial and it's better than maybe somewhere else, right? What is that real happiness, though? All of those things I just rattled off, those are all technically true, but they are symptoms of what I would consider the things at GitHub that are what we optimize for happiness. They are symptoms. They are not the cause of our happiness. They are the result of the framework of happiness that we have. So let's go through them. I created a framework. I said, okay, well, I like creating things and giving them names, so I've created the framework of happiness for you today. I just talked about that. And so, a framework. Ta-da! Oh. All right. It starts like this. It starts with security, and I know what you're thinking. Oh, you're just ripping off Maslow's hierarchy of needs or whatever. No, that's way more complex and whatever. Like, it's different. I swear. It's totally different. It's totally different. I totally invented this out of nowhere. So security, the base layer. What is security? And how does that lead to happiness? How does that allow for happiness? From the beginning of GitHub, from day one, we've always had 100% healthcare coverage. And now, this being a not United Statesian country, you have more sensible feelings about healthcare, so you don't have to worry about this stuff as much, but we definitely do in our backwards country. So we provide for all US citizens that are team members of GitHub, we provide 100% healthcare. And what that means is you, as a team member of GitHub, should never have to, out of your own pocket, have to pay for any medical coverage ever. That is the goal. That is the goal. If someone ever has to do that, then we've failed and we need to modify the insurance plans that we offer. Because if you are a person working for a company and you're worried about health, like this is one of the most basic needs. Go back to Maslow's hierarchy. Like this is step one. If you're worried about the cold that you have or you just broke your arm and you're like, well, I can't really go to the hospital because I don't have enough money to pay for all the fees because my insurance isn't sufficient, and now your arm heals badly and now you can't type anymore, and like that doesn't make you a good worker. So if you worry about those things, then you're never going to be able to have the kind of creativity unlocked that would otherwise be possible if you worry about health for you or for your family, right? If you have a sick kid, you're not going to spend a lot of time thinking about how to manage all the security flaws in Rails, for instance, right? Like, this is not where your time is going to go. It's going to go to thinking about your kids, right? But if you have healthcare, you can at least take that off of the table. You say, healthcare is taken care of. The health of my family is covered. So that's number one. And the metric of that in the early day was about a year into doing GitHub, Scott Chacon, our first proper hire outside of the founders, had a kid. And we're like, oh, okay, well, this will be a very nice test of whether our healthcare is up to the task or not. And he successfully had a child without having to pay anything. So I'm very happy to say that we do that. And that's because security is the base of happiness. You can't have other happiness until you have healthcare. Another one is safety. And by that I mean no tolerance for racism, sexism, ageism, any of the prejudices or behaviors that people would do to sort of, I don't know, maintain power over someone else. Those types of things. You have to be in a safe environment in order to be happy. If you are subject to sexism in the workplace, then I'm pretty damn sure that you're not ever going to be happy there. So that's one of them. Compensation is another one. Talk about money. When we talk about salaries, really the goal of a salary in my mind should be you want to have a fair price for someone that takes the market into account, but that removes from a team member's mind the issue of money on a general basis. Right? You get paid enough so that you don't have to spend a bunch of cycles thinking about how you're going to make your mortgage payment. That would be the goal. Because as long as you're not worried about money, you can start thinking about the things that are going to make better products and services. But you need to get past that point of security. Okay, so that's layer one. All right, take care of that. And then you get up to layer two, which are the more intellectual pursuits. And no, this is not a list of NASA shuttle missions. This is what I think, and I sat down very carefully in my bed horizontally and stared at the ceiling and thought about what are the intellectual needs that we have when we're working on hard stuff together that makes it worthwhile, that makes it really good, that gives me a feeling of happiness, that makes me want to be there and be involved. And so that's these three: freedom, opportunity, and cooperation. So by freedom, I mean things like managing your own time. Right? We're all adults here, except maybe my son, who's probably around somewhere. He's 10 months old. Yeah, and you might hear him from time to time. That's okay. So managing your own time. Right? We're all adults, and we should know when we work best. What hours do we work best? Is it in the morning? Are we morning people? Is it at night? Do we want to stay up super late? Are you Ryan Tomeko, one of our guys who works, I don't even know. Like what schedule? It's the Tomeko schedule. He has his own definition of what reasonable work hours are, but that's fine because he's also one of our best people, and he gets his best work done at whatever hour it happens to be when he's awake. Right? But that's not what I would count as my normal hours, and it's probably not what you would count as yours. But they are for him. And people do their best work when they do their best work, not when you tell them to do their best work. 9 to 5, right? A lot of programmers not going to do their best work 9 to 5, so why would you make them do that? Another bit of freedom is the freedom to potentially move to another team within the company. I've worked at companies before where I'm working on something. My last job before GitHub was PowerSet, and I was working on internal tools. I was building a mechanical Turk system. I was working on that day in and day out, forever and always. And it can get tedious. If you're always working on the same thing all the time, you might get burned out on that. But if you have the freedom to look at other areas of the company and say, hey, I want to contribute to that from time to time. Or, hey, maybe I should just completely switch to that other team because my skills are perfect for that, and I've kind of made my mark here, and I got done what I wanted to hear, and it's time to pass the torch to someone else. Making that possible is part of freedom. Making that possible, and expected, that people will move around. One of our guys, Drew Woods, used to be on the technical support team for GitHub Enterprise. And now he runs a lot of the video systems within GitHub to allow us to stream events that we have, all hands, meetings that we have, to all of the distributed team of GitHub, which is about 2/3 of the company. So he switched from support to video, right? Because that fit his desires, his interests better. And we can bring someone else in that is going to be able to focus better on enterprise support. Okay, so make that first class. That's freedom. The freedom to contribute to any discussion within the company, right? Any discussion, anything. We use GitHub for most of our discussions. We have mailing lists. We have all kinds of ways that we talk to each other. And anyone can contribute to any discussion. The way that decisions are usually made at GitHub is the team that works on something every day. If you work on a project every day, you're on that team. Now, your team makes decisions on that product or with that service. Anyone else in the company, though, can come along and say, hey, I have information that could be useful to you, and I think you should use it to make a better decision on whatever you're talking about. Okay, well, that's a contribution, right? You have the freedom to do that anywhere in the company. You're doing it as an advisory role. You're not going to be responsible for making that decision, but you can help influence people so that they make better decisions. We also do it with hiring. We've built ourselves a hiring tool where anybody in the company can give feedback and be involved in the interview process and give feedback in an open forum about any candidate. And then we talk through it. This is how we make good decisions about hiring. And also the freedom to have fun. Right? This is sort of addresses the work-life balance. But even saying work-life balance, I think, is a bit of a false dichotomy. I don't think work and life have to be totally separate. Right? To say that is to say that they are opposite. But I don't know that they really are. I think for a lot of us, especially at GitHub, work and life are very blurry. Hi, Jackson. And so we need to consider giving people the freedom to blur those lines when necessary. Why can't we have fun at work? Why can't we do email at home? I don't know. It's up to every person to moderate what that means in their family environment. But at least at GitHub, it can be a place where we can hang out and have fun, right? Play a game of pool. Get some DJ set up so that a bunch of the people in GitHub that like to perform DJ sets can do that on a Friday night after our all hands. That's freedom, because it's not hurting anyone, and it's bringing us all closer together. All right, so that's freedom. That's what I mean by freedom. By opportunity, I mean the opportunity to use the best tools, right? This is why we give people laptops and iPhones and iPads, because we have a lot of internal applications that we built for ourselves that need these tools. And if you're a developer, well, you need a damn good computer. And it could be a Mac, it could be a Windows machine, it could be a Linux machine, it doesn't matter. Whatever is the best tool for that person's job, that's what they're going to get. It doesn't matter how much it costs, because the cost of that device is so minimal compared to whatever you're paying this person in salary anyway. Like, why do people even think about that? It's absurd. It's absurd to think about that, right? Give people the opportunity to do their best work. In order to do that, you provide them with the equipment to do it. Speaking at conferences and networking. So I'm here, and I am here. GitHub will pay for my flights and my accommodations to be here because I am speaking. Also, Jeremy McAnally, who's speaking later on, his same deal. We pay for him. Anyone at GitHub that wants to speak at a conference and gets a speaking slot, we will pay for them to go to that conference and do that, because it's a win-win. The individual wins because increased networking, visibility, career progress, everything that is great about speaking, and also win for the company because they're showing the world that we care about participating in conferences, and that it's marketing, right? It's advertising. Now you see GitHub being talked about and the various things that we do. So it's a win-win. The opportunity to lead a team. Almost everyone at GitHub that I would consider a leader, a team leader of some sort on a project or a service, has arisen through us hiring them to be an individual contributor and then showing themselves ready to lead a team as we've grown. There's a few places where that's not the case, and sometimes you have to hire leaders for projects that otherwise don't have people that are willing or able to do that, right? But that should be the exception. We want to give people the opportunity to lead stuff if that's where they're going, and I'm happy, the company is happy to help train them and bring them up. That's opportunity. Access to learning materials. We give everyone a free Kindle as well. And that's just like, hey, you have a free Kindle, ta-da, now you're happy. It's because it's an opportunity to learn new things, buying business books or technical books so you can take your career and keep it going. That's why we do that. The opportunity to influence decisions at any level, whether it's a decision I'm making or a decision that's happening deep down in the systems level of github.com, you have the opportunity to do that, right? Same as the freedom to do that, but also the opportunity to do that, because that's how you can show where your skills are and demonstrate to other people that you might be a good leader. So that's opportunity. And then cooperation, number 3, cooperation. There's a great quote that I read recently in this book that's called The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. Now, I've only read about 5 pages of this book, so I cannot recommend it yet. However, this quote was pretty awesome. So it goes like this. If you could get all the people in an organization rowing in the same direction, you could dominate any industry in any market against any competition at any time. And that really resonates with me. So much of what is hard in the world is about teams and about building teams to tackle hard problems. And the thing that kills those teams most often is just dysfunction within the team. It's not that the problem is hard. It's not that the problem is unsolvable. It's not that the market's not ready. It's not that there's competitors at all. It's that the team just can't get it together to tackle that problem. And that's, I think, where cooperation is one of these 3. That's why it's one of these 3. And so what does cooperation look like at GitHub? For us, our organizational structure, I would not refer to as flat. Some people would say, oh, GitHub has a flat organizational structure, because we don't have this strongly hierarchical diagram of who reports to who that we can draw. It just doesn't really exist. It's not our structure. Our structure looks very much more like this. This is a graph of the connections in the Ruby open source community. This is very much what GitHub is modeled after. It's modeled after open source and how open source works. So it ends up looking like this. I wouldn't call it flat. I would call it highly networked. And that means that any person can talk to any other person without that being an assault on someone else's authority, right? You know, in hierarchical companies, you always have this problem of, well, should I go above my boss's head to raise this issue? Why is this a problem? Yes, of course, always. Yes, go talk to whoever's necessary in order to say what the problems are so that they can be addressed. And in a highly networked system, that happens naturally. That's the main goal. That's why. Talk to everyone. Talk to everyone all the time. Talking is a great way to solve problems, it turns out. We believe in this so strongly that we've started building tools for ourselves that encapsulate this type of connectedness and highly networked organization. This is what we call the vision network. This is a diagram of the projects and services and things we do at GitHub and captures what the vision of each of those things is. So we start at this high level of the vision. Visions of things. So github.com, right, in the middle there. We also have GitHub 1.0, right? That's what, some imagined future of what github.com itself might be. The business, which is all of the things it takes to run the company itself. Other hidden stuff that, well, you don't get to see yet because you don't work at GitHub. This captures more authentically our structure. Who's working on what? And a person might be on multiple teams, because it's not about hierarchy and departments. It's about who works on what stuff all the time, and who are your people? Who are the people working on things with you? That's what we want to capture. We also get everyone in the company together in the same physical location in San Francisco twice a year. We call them the GitHub Summit. And we spend literally hundreds of thousands of dollars twice a year to do this. And we incur this expense because of the cooperation that it aids, and because we are so distributed. About 2/3 of the company is not in the Bay Area. And so having everyone together, physically close to each other, gives you these additional bonds and creates that camaraderie and that cooperation that I think is key to happiness. Looking for win-win situations like I talked about before. That's cooperation. Look for something that's not zero-sum. You don't have to lose in order for me to win. We can both win. Look for those situations. We make decisions by valuing good arguments. That's how good decisions are made. And this is, if you remember one thing from this, remember this. Decisions are how everything happens. And if you don't decide well, then your company, your service, whatever you're trying to do is not going to turn out well. How do you make good decisions? You do it by valuing good argument. And by argument, I don't mean fighting. Like we're fighting about, you have a position and I have a position. It's about talking through things and cooperating and identifying logical fallacies and saying, no, that's not a legitimate argument. We can do better, and we have to do better. And we have to consider more options instead of just saying it's A or B. This is all skills of argument. So if you want to be a better decision maker, figure out how to argue better. And there's plenty of stuff online and in books that can help you do that. That's also the best way to prevent politics, it turns out. Politics is when decisions are made by people talking to each other because of their authority instead of the decisions having merit of their own. And we've all, I think, probably been in organizations that are driven by politics, and they suck. It's hard to get anything good done. It's all made by the people at the top of the hierarchy who have something to lose, and they make decisions amongst themselves, and people can't contribute. Like, how can you alter the direction of that? Cooperation is jumping into action when you're called. So on GitHub, we have what we call @mentions, right? You put the @ symbol and then a person's GitHub username, and they will get a notification. You can do that in pull requests and issues, all kinds of places on GitHub. We use this heavily at GitHub itself, right? With our legal team and our security team, we can say, hey, @GitHub/legal, you can do it with Teams, @GitHub/legal, I have a question about the terms of service. Boom. Our counsel, Julio, comes in, answers the question. Or the security team, hey, I'm going to change this form. I'm not sure what the security ramifications of this are. Could I get a quick review of this? CC @GitHub/security. And then they come to the call. Without having to be asked, you just mention them, and like magic, they just show up and solve your problem. That's cooperation. Operating across locations and time zones is also part of cooperation. Not being bound to a specific time, or as Ryan Tomeko, who I was talking about before, not having your life being dictated by the sun. Why are we letting the sun dictate when we do stuff? You're not the boss of me! So that's the middle level of the framework. Freedom, opportunity, and cooperation. But okay, well so I know what you're saying. You're like, yeah, that sounds all great for like, I don't know, a hippie communist love fest. But how can that possibly work in a business? You can't get stuff done that way. Well, that's where the next layer comes in, which is how you keep this working together. It's how this system does not just crumble and fall apart because everyone's just doing whatever they want. And that's leadership and commitment. Without leadership, there's chaos. Leadership is what keeps things together. And I say leaders very specifically instead of the more traditional word managers. And I say that because leadership is compatible with freedom, one of the things I talked about before, whereas management really, generally, the way that most people think about it is not. Unless you're talking about really good management, which is basically leadership, management in a traditional hierarchical company is not really that much about freedom. And so I say leadership. To wrap it up nicely, I would think people are led and things are managed. And you don't want to confuse the two, because people aren't things. And if you treat them that way, then you're not going to have much of this happiness that we're striving for. So leadership from a freedom, opportunity, cooperation standpoint, you can start looking at it in that light and make some interesting observations. You can say, well, because of opportunity, you want to emphasize enabling leadership from within the company instead of always looking for executives outside the company to solve all your problems. We'll give people the opportunity to tackle those problems from within. From a perspective of freedom, you want to allow people to be both leaders and individual contributors, and maybe go back and forth. Especially on development groups, giving people the opportunity to, or the freedom, you could use either one, the freedom to sometimes be in charge of a project within a larger project, like a sub-project, and sometimes just be an individual contributor to another project. That's really nice. It gives you a break. Leadership is hard. And giving people a break is super nice, allowing that freedom to do that when it makes sense. from the level of cooperation, you want to not have a hierarchical structure where you have individual departments that are fighting each other for resources or for what the next version of something is going to look like. You don't want a lot of secrecy between them, like at Apple. Like, how does Apple operate? I have no idea. Like, every department has no idea what anyone else is doing. Or the classic is Microsoft, where departments often have relationships that are competitive with each other. And that's not, I think, how it should be. That doesn't make me less stressed out. That doesn't make me happy. But encouraging cooperation amongst those groups, that gives you a greater level of happiness, better decision making. You need the right mix of both leaders and individual contributors, though, right? You have to have the right mix. And then you're going to have fewer leaders probably than individual contributors because you have teams. All right, so getting that mix is critical. Because if you have a bunch of individual contributors where no one feels in charge of a project, well, that project maybe is not going to turn out so well because who's driving it? Who's going to be the one that's really fighting for the good decisions and to move it forward and to go that extra step? If that person isn't there, that's when things get problematic. And we've seen that at GitHub. Like, that happens. So you need the right mix. And that's leadership like myself, where I think very much about the whole company. I spend a lot of my time thinking specifically about that. Do we have the right mix of leaders and individual contributors? And so let's look very quickly at commitment. And this works for both leaders and individual contributors who both commit to things. It's hard to get any steam on a project if no one is willing to commit to that every day. Both leaders and followers commit to stuff. And nobody's going to make a commitment for you. No one's going to point at you and say, you are now committed to this project. Because that eliminates this concept of freedom. The freedom to choose something that aligns with your interests. Now, let me just say this very quickly because I don't otherwise cover it in this talk, but it's not about just working on the stuff that you want to work on. That stuff has to align with your interests and also has to be important to the company, important to the team. When you have those two things, you have what's basically called open allocation. And if you Google that, you'll come up with some articles, one by Michael O. Church, where he describes it very well. And some of this article I agree with, and some of I don't. But the first half is basically super awesome, and it's what we strive for a lot at GitHub. Open allocation allows you to work on the stuff that you care about as long as it's important to the business. But you have to make a commitment to those things. Because no one's managing you. No one's pointing at you and saying, you are going to do these 6 bugs this week. It's not really going to happen. You're going to choose some bugs to work on that align with your interests and are important to the company. And then you're going to go do those things. You're responsible for yourself. We're all at GitHub responsible for ourselves. You're responsible to either lead something or commit to a project as an individual contributor. Either way, if you commit yourself, if you yourself commit to a project, then that project is going to be awesome because we all love working on stuff that we've chosen to work on and that we care about. And I think caring is how you make good product and how you stay happy doing it. But happiness isn't skin deep. Happiness isn't the things I talked about before, the no managers, the working on whatever you want, working where you want, not tracking vacation days, laptops, parties. That is not happiness in and of itself. It is the skin of happiness. That's a weird phrase, but I'm going with it. It's the skin of happiness. But happiness isn't skin deep. It's much deeper than that. And that's where this framework comes into play. And why go through the bother of any of this? Why is this useful or necessary? And for me, it's because doing what we do, programming, it's not, we don't sit down and we're like, I'm just going to get filthy rich. Right? Or I'm going to be frustrated trying to get rich because capitalism, I didn't have the opportunities I needed, and my path is wrong, and now I'm just screwed. Right? Because capitalism sucks sometimes for most people. And I think we can do better than that. And we can do it by optimizing for happiness and understanding what happiness means. And at the end of the day, ask yourself, if this sounds interesting to you, ask yourself, can you use it to manufacture happiness? Thank you. Yeah, so excellent question. Very good question. This relates to open allocation. Is there ever anything the company needs to get done, but nobody wants to do it, basically, and no one's allocating themselves to it? This does occur sometimes, right? And from time to time, it has to be addressed. But really, it's about talking to people and getting teams, and especially leaders, to be able to talk to the group that they're leading and say, hey, this is the stuff that's important. This is what we have to do. Like, we have to get the system working or the site will fall over in 3 weeks. All right, now as a team, if you all agree on that, you say, yes, okay, we've identified what's important. Now it's time to commit ourselves to those things. And you split up those activities amongst the people in that group. And you don't leave that room or that email thread until you've got those things covered. Or you say, okay, well, we can do this, but there's no one really on the team that's both interested and capable of doing this right now, so let's go start looking for someone to hire. So you can solve that problem by getting people to commit to it just by saying, well, look, we have to get this done. We all have to commit to something. If that doesn't happen, then you bring in part 2 of commitment, which is accountability. And eventually, if people aren't accountable to the things they commit to, well, then you have to have a discussion. But yes, it's complicated. We're still figuring this stuff out. We don't really have reviews, like performance reviews or anything right now. But we're starting to look at and say, what are GitHub-y kinds of ways to approach peer reviews? Looking at objective metrics of like what it means to be doing good work and contributing to the company. So we're starting to think about, measure, and put a system like that into place that allows this stuff to scale out even more. We're 166 people right now, but we're going to get a lot bigger than that. So we have to figure that out. So yes, work in progress. So far, stuff gets done. Yes, in the back over here.
Hi. This is a wonderful kind of potentially utopian dream when you have lots of means and lots of stuff to do. If you're a 3-4 person startup, have you got any advice or suggestion of where you might start with this? What are the kind of the key thing you can't necessarily afford to give everyone the latest tech, the latest tools?
Right. So I'd say it's about values. Right? As long as you understand what your values are and what you care about, and for me, my values are these things, the things I talked about. If you pin down your values and say, this is what we care about, this is what we're going for, at least people can understand it, and you can do your best to get there. And then when you are ready, when you do have the capabilities to do all of that as much as you want, then you can go do that, and you can just accelerate and optimize for those things. Otherwise, if your resources are minimal, then you have to make do. Right? But you make do within the concept of the things you care about. So I'd say, this goes back to the question of culture too, and like what is culture, and can you plan and manufacture culture? And I don't think you really can. I think culture, if you're starting a company, if you're a few people on a team, the culture comes from you, from the first 3, 4, 5, 10, 15 people on a team. That's your culture. You're done. Like you better get those hires right because now that's your culture. And everyone you hire is going to fit within that culture, or you're probably not going to hire them. And you'll start expanding a little bit, but if you get that wrong, you're screwed. And so all that matters is that your culture is right, and that means that your values are right. So I'd focus there and say, what are our values? What do we all together believe in and want to accomplish? Yes.
What do you think would be on kind of 2 axes, the scaling issues? There's one issue which is kind of the size of the company. What would be the outward scale you could imagine for this current structure? And the other one on time, because you're all young and beautiful. What happens when you start to get old and ugly?
So let me understand the question. That you want to know what the axes are? Yeah. Oh, like how far can this go? That structure? I don't know. Here's the thing, right? When I first talked about optimizing for happiness, the company was like 12 people. And we were like, this system totally works. And people are like, well, okay, maybe it works right now, but not when you're 20 or 25. That's an inflection. Or when you're 50, that's an inflection. Or when you're 100, you hit 150, Dunbar's number. Now you're totally screwed, right? And those are probably true. Like the structure that we had when we were 13 doesn't work when you're anything past that. So you figure it out, right? And don't pretend like the system is easy. Running a company like this is way harder than running it via a hierarchical traditional management structure. Like way, way, way harder. Because you actually have to think about stuff. Right? But it turns out that you can get the upside of that, the upside of thinking about and really trying to get this stuff right, is so high that it's worth the effort. So I don't know what GitHub at 200 looks like, or 300, or 500. I can't really predict right now, but I bet these values are still the same. Yeah. I think it's really interesting. And at GitHub, it worked out really well. Because of valuing things like freedom and giving people the opportunity to work whenever works best for them, you accommodate both the freewheeling, partying youngsters with that model, but also the parents who need to pick up their kids from school. And so you might have a bit of a split in how people act on a daily basis. But again, it goes back to what are the values of your culture? Whether people are young or old, we still value these things. We still value people that value those things, and that's the culture. So we look for people that have a culture fit. There's 3 things that we look for when we hire at GitHub. We look for, do they share our same culture? Are they culturally compatible? Right? Not in every way. You don't want to just have a homogenous group of people that all think the same thing. Like, that's not healthy. But do they basically have the same values as us? Do they care about this stuff? Do they care about cooperation? Can they work on a team, et cetera? We look for if they have the same taste, or that their taste is good. Not the same taste as us, but do they have good taste? And I could go into a big rant about what taste is, but I don't have time. And number 3 is, do they ship? Can you ship? Can you ship whatever it is that you do? Can you ship good experiences if you're a service person? Can you ship product if you're a product person? Can you ship? Those are the 3 things. And as long as those things are there, then it doesn't matter how old you are. It matters that you care about those things. That's what keeps the company together. How many more do we have time for? I'm like way over. What's that? I'm sorry? Okay, one more. You, I haven't done one over here yet. Okay, yeah, so junior people. So this is a challenge for us because the system, given the high amounts of freedom, make it more difficult to have a structure in place where a junior developer can come in and start learning and have someone there to mentor them and these types of things. Which is why at GitHub we basically just don't have junior people, which makes us bad citizens of the world. But we're actually looking a lot more into this with like apprenticeship programs. Like how can we bring in people that are right out of college and really foster them? And it's about commitment and leadership. It's about having a leader, someone who's in a mentor position, commit to being there for that person, to bring them up to speed and to be with them. And maybe their productivity will go down overall, but you have a much more sustainable curve. So yeah, one thing this model does not work well for is having a large group of junior people, just because it does not. You could do it, I think, but you'd have to think about it from the beginning. And when you're a startup and you're just trying to get your thing done and into the market, you don't have a lot of time to think about those things. But now we're at the size 150. And I think big companies are way better at this because you do have more flexibility. Not every person's every day is the life or death of a company. And so you free up a lot of capacity to deal with and help junior people come up. So yeah, we suck at it right now. Yes. But, which? Yeah, I would love to. I mean, it's not a value right now in a big way, but I would love it to be a value in the future. Yes. All right. Thanks, everyone.
Hi, Professor Gerald Friedman, University of Massachusetts at Amherst again, and we're talking about wealth and happiness, the orthodox view and the real world. I hate to say that, real world, but okay. Orthodox economists, neoclassical economists, have a very simple model of happiness. And the model expressed like this. Toys equals happiness. More toys equals more happiness. The more you have, the happier you'll be. This comes from the simple Robinson Crusoe model of people. Robinson Crusoe, the more stuff he had, the happier he was going to be. He made the stuff himself. If he didn't want it, he wouldn't have made it. If he had 2 canoes, it must be because he wanted 2 canoes, since he had to make the second canoe. So 2 canoes must be happier than with 1 canoe. 3 canoes, he'd be happier still. At worst, if he didn't like something, if he made a mistake and made a 4th canoe and found, oh, I don't really have any place for it, he'd just leave it, burn it, throw it away, dispose of it. More stuff is more happy. Now, from this, you expect Americans should be very happy. Per capita income, the average amount of stuff that we have has grown by about 2% a year for 200 years. So the amount of stuff we have doubles every 35 years. Nowadays, we have about $30,000 worth of stuff per person, compared to about $100 worth of stuff in 1790. We must be happy, right? Robinson Crusoe would have been happy, all this stuff. And if you look within countries, you do surveys of happiness within countries, rich people are happier than poor people. Surprise, surprise. Paris Hilton, with her $600 million, is happier than Lindsay Lohan, who has, I don't know, 20 million. And she's probably happier than Dan, the videographer, who has, I don't know, $150, and a coffee card, for People's Market. People with more money within any country are happier. But then there's a problem. And this problem was discovered by an economist at the University of Southern California, Richard Easterlin, about 40 years ago. And since then it's been called the Easterlin paradox. And it's been checked and tested by lots of people. Over time, there's no increase in happiness in advanced capitalist countries. Americans are almost 4 times as wealthy as we were right after World War II, but we're no happier. The same for the Europeans, and most amazingly, the same for the Japanese, who are actually a little less happy than they were right after World War II, when they were devastated and starving. What's been going on? Why hasn't happiness increased with increasing wealth over time? And this shows up across the world. If we can erase this for a second, I'll quickly draw you a generalized graph of survey data for different countries. Down here is average income. So here's $35,000 per person, the US. Here's $100 for Cameroon. And here's happiness. This is what it looks like. Over here, you have an income level of about $10,000 per person, which is about what the United States was after World War II. Beyond that point, you don't get any more happiness. I mean, some countries are less happy, Russia. Some countries are more happy, Finland. Here's the US, just about on the line. Here's Cameroon, and here's Haiti. I mean, these are poor countries. For them to get a little more wealth, yes, they get happier. They start getting clean water, they get antibiotics, they get enough to eat, they get a change of clothes. And going up to about $10,000, yes, people do get happier. Beyond that, no. Extra wealth beyond $10,000 or so per person in a society does not lead to greater happiness for the society as a whole. Why not? I mean, we could think about various reasons, and you can think about them within your own lives. What really makes you happy? Once you have a warm place to sleep, can take a shower, have hot water, enough to eat, some change of clothes. What makes you happy is your social life, your relations with other people, having friends. More goods crowds out social relations. There's some, I'm not sure how this was, I don't remember how this was recorded, but I believe it was Paris Hilton on some video having sex with somebody on the internet, stopped to answer the telephone. That kind of thing can really ruin your social life. at least with that person. Goods crowds out your social life because you have to take your car in to be repaired. You have to, fuss with your computer. You have to update your internet. You have to do this, that, whatever. All instead of spending time with people you care about or might come to care about. Second, what really makes us happy, and this sounds bad, but there's a lot of truth to it. Why do you like the Lexus you just bought? Because you drive it into your driveway and you see the looks on your neighbors. They are impressed. You want more so you can show everyone else what a success you are. And you can feel like a success because you have more than they do. If we all have more, none of us are benefiting. Make everybody taller, and the NBA has taller players, but nobody gets an advantage. If everybody has a BMW, then nobody is impressing anybody else. It's just everybody's running harder to get to that BMW instead of spending their time socializing with other people. Why doesn't money make you happier as a society? Third reason, because more stuff creates more problems for everybody. If everybody has one car, driving around is hard. Everybody has 2 cars. Every family has 3 cars. Traffic, pollution, noise. We get all the external costs of our stuff. Yeah. What we really want is to have good relationships with other people. Money doesn't do anything for that as a society as a whole. So more GDP, more production, more stuff. It hasn't been a good way to increase happiness as a whole. On that kind of depressing note, but not necessarily depressing because we can think of it as an opportunity to change our ways and get something out of it, I leave you. Have a good day. Thank you.
Three Steps to Happiness. Healing through joy. A 3-step process that will help you move into your natural, joyful state of being. Reclaim both health and passion in your life. By Jacob Teitelbaum, MD, Director, Kona Research Center. Narrated by Ronald Stiles. Published by Plowshare Press. Happiness is our natural state of being. It is who we are. This happiness is obvious when you look at little children before they take on society's beliefs. Their natural state is to feel all their feelings without resistance, leaving them free to spend most of their time being happy and playful. It is not necessary to be happy all the time. By applying the simple 3-step principles in this book, you can develop the ability to be happy whenever you choose. Dr. Teitelbaum's personal experience with thousands of very ill patients shows that these techniques can help you reclaim both the health and passion in your life. Preface. Many, if not most of us, are caught up in old habits and ways of thinking that sap our happiness and keep us stuck in places that feel bad. In this book, you will learn a simple 3-step process that will help you move into your natural, joyful state of being. This is a book on how to be happy when you want to be, not a book saying that you have to be happy all the time. I think that if I had to be happy all the time, I would find it to be incredibly annoying. This book will teach you that you can be happy when you choose to be, which I think you will find will be most of the time. Sometimes it feels good to wallow in feelings of self-pity, revel in self-righteous anger, and generally have a good time with feelings that are supposed to feel bad. This book will teach you how to feel all your feelings, and then how to let go of them. It will also show you how to enjoy the life you have while also providing powerful tools for creating the life you choose. Experience shows that health follows naturally from feeling happy and following your bliss, not from focusing on illness. Therefore, although health often returns naturally from doing the techniques outlined in this book, I will not write much about illness itself. I know that it makes me happy to read a book that does not go on and on. You will find, therefore, that I purposely kept this book short, clear, and as easy to read as possible. So let's go. I hope you enjoy it. Jacob Teitelbaum, MD.
Hi, it's Debbie Williams. I'm an NLP trainer and hypnotherapist, and today I want to talk about what I learnt from Paul McKenna. Now, I helped Paul from about 96. I was training with him a bit before then, and he did a year-long program with Dr. Richard Bandler, the guy who co-founded NLP, and I ended up assisting him then for many years afterwards on lots and lots of courses. And one of the things that I learned from Paul, one of the many things I learned from Paul, was that the trouble with happiness is people don't practice it enough. And it is so, so true. You know, we watch the news, it's 99.999% horrible stuff. We watch the soaps on TV, and it's all negative thing because it creates drama of, you know, people fighting and arguing and being disloyal and generally bad behaviour. So we're almost dumbed down to the joy that is out there. You know, how many times have you actually stopped in this last week to look at something in nature and to have a bit of a breather, to connect with our earth, to connect with the beauty that is around you? And I remember speaking to Paul many years ago when he was doing his weight loss courses, and I said to him, when I help people lose weight, I always get them to keep a success journal to record their journey of what works, and it's a very clean journal that only good things go in. And Paul said, oh, that's a really good idea. And I don't know whether it was me suggesting that or, you know, Paul's probably heard similar things before, but within a couple of months he brought out his 90 days to success. And see, we all influence each other. And I know I've been influenced so positively by Paul. I'd like to think that maybe he was influenced by me. And I hope that I can influence you positively to maybe get yourself a wonderful journal and start to write in the things that you could feel happy about. Whether it is stopping to smell a rose and to say to yourself, nature's wonderful, to remembering, you know, days out with good friends, to remembering maybe something that's significant to you of winning an award, and to capture this information in a journal that only records good things. Now, when I help people overcome depression, this is one of the things that I do on the one stream, is get them to do this, because I'm saying to their brain, this is important, we want to look for this and we want to record it. And many times they will go away and they'll go out of their way to smell a rose, and they'll rate it degree of pleasure out of 10 was a 2, you know, because they've just got so disconnected from the happiness. But over time, the brain gets drawn to this and it learns. And it learns quicker than you can imagine to start focusing more on the positive and more on what can I learn to move on. Now, I hope you've been inspired to get your success journal and also watch some more of the videos as I talk more on little strategies that you can do that really will work together to enable you to be happy and to practice it and to feel it. Bye now.
In order to follow Buddhism, I must not cling to happiness or people that give me happiness. Does this mean that I shouldn't make friends and/or stop associating with my friends? as I enjoy being around my friends and it gives me happiness. Okay, the word happiness, again, the ambiguity. Buddhism says that none of that brings you happiness. And that's the unfortunate thing, that if these things gave you happiness, true happiness, then you should cling to them and hold on to them. But because they don't give you happiness, clinging to them is a cause of suffering. That's what Buddhism says. Buddhism doesn't say must not, should not. Buddhism says if, then. So it's much more powerful. It's not trying to convince you or coerce you into being one way or another. It's telling you the truth. And it's up to you to realize the truth, appreciate it, or deny the truth. So if you cling to people, the fact that or the idea that it makes you happy is an illusion. And as you practice meditation, you'll realize that it's not actually making you happy. It's actually just giving you some pleasure, which entices you to cling stronger, which eventually leads to repeated distress and suffering every time you don't get what you want, or every time you're forced to strive for the pleasant states again. So the enjoying being around your friends, except where it's involved with wholesomeness. There's the case where you're helping each other, where you're appreciating each other, where you're compassionate and so on, where you're able to support each other. That is positive. But the enjoyment, the liking or the attachment to pleasurable states is unwholesome and will lead you to suffering when you have to leave your friends, when you're surrounded by unpleasant people, etc., etc. It means you're vulnerable. You're always vulnerable to change, and therefore suffering is in your future because of that attachment.